We're going to record. Okay, we're recording the meeting. Thank you. All right. So, thanks for coming. We're happy to have you here today. We've decided to do something a little bit different because we know everyone is busy and everyone is dealing with different challenges right now, and the world is a lot different. We decided not to go with a traditional speaker. We actually had one on ice, but I want to save her until we have some time to really get into some of the great things she's doing on sales communications and stuff. So she will come probably in December and speak to all of you. So what we want to do today is really get into an open session, ask questions, share ideas. I don't know that we all have answers, but maybe, you know, what one person's dealing with, someone else can jump in and contribute and share, because there's never a right or wrong answer. It's all in how you're dealing with stuff. So in that regard, I'll introduce our board of directors that are here today. So we have Kai Ackerman from Flash Limousine. We have Michael McDaniels from Shriver Insurance. We have Art Rento, who's our president from Ponarelli Companies. And we have Jim from Lextex Transportation, and Tracy, who is our vice president from Windy City Limousine. Wave, Tracy, yay. Okay, well, don't take your hands off the wheel. All right. And then, because Chris is here, he's compliant, so we have to behave. All right. And we have Jay Pearson, who is one of our vendor, also one of our members from Century Business Solutions. Okay, I did all the other stuff. Good. All right. So I guess to talk, you have to take yourself off mute, but we wanted to really keep it kind of light. Ask you if there was anything you'd like to talk about. If you don't worry. I brought my own questions just in case. So let's do it.
Yeah. Art, did you have anything that you wanted to add before we get started?
No, I think Paula nailed it. She's got it down. I mean, it's a question and answer thing. I'd imagine at this point in time, everybody has some sort of a question, something they're trying to figure out, you know, where they should be and how they should look at whatever's happening. And this is an opportunity for all of us to get together and kind of brainstorm it and maybe come up with a solution, or not, just hear somebody else's idea that may or may not work for you.
Yeah, and I just want to add, you know, much the same as what Art and Paula had just said is during the week with being on the NLA board, as I've been having several conversations with operators across the nation, and it's definitely interesting the last 3 or 4 months how our industry is evolving, or how it's definitely changing, and I doubt if it'll ever go back to the way that we knew it. And just a couple of examples of that, and maybe there might be 1 or 2 of those points that we could go into deeper discussion on. But when you look at the IO market, and you know, IOs no longer are just working for 1, 2, or 3 companies, is now, because of technology, which we kind of started the call on, but because of technology and the WhatsApp groups and the different texting options that you now have, is IOs are truly able to have a business of their own and work amongst themselves and not have to rely on brick and mortar companies. So it's really interesting how that's evolving. Staying on the IO topic is, you know, IOs now with rideshare and doing business amongst themselves, is they're getting paid within 24, 48 hours. So how does that look like in our industry going forward? Are larger companies able to do that? Are they able to pull that off? You know, what does that look like a year from now? Is that something that's going to stay? Do we need to ask our software providers to start adding a Venmo or Cash App options to the platforms for those reasons alone? You know, what's that look like a year from now? You know, looking at vehicles, you know, they're very, very hard to find right now. And when we are able to find them, what's that vehicle going to look like? Are we going to have a sedan for our industry? You know, and then going into SUVs, you know, just, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, our sedans were $39,000, $42,000. And now we're looking at $55,000, $60,000 as the average price. And I'm not very up on our prices and what have you, but I know prices have definitely increased. What does that look like when it comes to how we are how we are creating our rates for our customers. And, you know, so now talking about rates is how many of you have increased your rates, and are you increasing them to the amount that your expenses are increasing? You know, I think each of us, even on a personal level, can attest to personal expenses increasing quite a bit in the last 3 months alone. And how does that equate into your rates that you're charging today? Are you keeping up with it, or is that profit just evaporating as quickly as, you know, you're doing the business? You know, and then we've got our struggles and our challenges at O'Hare. You know, how does that look now that we've all been extremely busy? Does it seem like we're getting by? I'm not hearing a lot of complaints. So I think that's a good thing, considering that the middle aisle has been shut down. So with this amount of volume, I think it's a good thing that we haven't heard too many complaints. Yes, it's not convenient. However, it's better than I ever thought it was going to be. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that. And then I do want to thank Art. So Art and I had worked together. So any of you that had gotten tickets for when you're doing meet and greets and you're leaving the garage and then getting a ticket for not paying your stamp because all of a sudden they changed the policy. Art and I were emailing back and forth for probably 3 or 4 weeks with the city, and right up until the very last, I think it was 30 minutes before our court case, we finally were able to get those tickets and citations waived because they did change the policy and they didn't let our industry know. So Paula's working with the airport now and the city to let them know how important their communication is. They just can't make policy changes and then decide to enforce them and then expect us to pay the citations. Like, that's not fair. So thanks to Art and Paula and all the time that was vested into getting those citations waived. If anybody else has those citations out there, contact us. We'll let you know who to talk to and what you can possibly say. But that obviously has changed, and that communication is coming out. So those are just a few things that I am immediately seeing and that we're dealing with right now. And so we can go into deeper discussions on any of those or any other ideas that anyone has.
Don't all speak at once.
So one of the things I was kind of curious about too is what everyone's plan is for hiring, right? So the number one concern we get from our clients is finding any chauffeurs, kind of number one, and then finding, you know, the chauffeurs you want is probably a completely separate discussion. But we have the entry-level driver training issue looming in February of next year. There's no indication that it's getting pushed back again. And the cost of CDLs is going, you know, up astronomically. My trucking clients right now are paying on average about $95,000 a year for company drivers with CDLs.
Wow.
So I'm wondering kind of what the plan is for the industry, if anyone's looking to manage a school or something like that in, you know, maybe the greater Chicago area or something along those lines, because all CDLs are going to have to go through an approved school in, you know, 5 months from now.
You know, that's interesting. And I'm not that familiar with that part of it. I'll definitely want to catch up with you more. But in Chicago, we have one city college that does all transportation and logistics training. And they have their own CDL program. They do forklift, they do all kinds of stuff. And typically, up until recently, my group has taken over and done quite a bit of the chauffeur licensing training for the city. They're still doing a little bit, and they do taxi as well, but taxi companies have started doing their own training for certifying for the chauffeur licenses. So I haven't heard anything. I get all the updates out of the college because I used to work there, but I'd be curious if the city is actually going to put something in their curriculum. And that might be something we should check. I mean, because I don't know if that's a good thing, bad thing, but they still have their CDL program. In fact, they made an offering last month to locals if they wanted to take the CDL training for free, because they were trying to get people into training because they were unemployed and all this other stuff. So they offered a bunch of their courses for no cost.
one of the related things you guys should look at is a lot of the states and cities have grant programs,
Mhm.
and you can sponsor your existing drivers through them. So if you say that you'll offer them a job if they come back with a CDL, Department of Workforce, Labor, that kind of thing will oftentimes pay for the program. So you can send them through at no cost to you as kind of an added benefit, but you have to get with the schools to figure out what the application process looks like and make sure you have them filled out. But we're definitely going to have a bigger CDL shortage here in the near future, and really crazy pay rates to go with it, I think.
Okay.
You don't think this is going to lead to a lot of CDLs being issued before February? Wouldn't people be wanting getting it done before they have to get trained?
And that's what we're telling people. You know, if you're thinking about getting one, now's the time, right?
I have one guy that started already.
Yeah.
Because right now you can still do the old fashioned way, right? You jump in a bus with a buddy, he shows you how to operate it.
Yep.
You know, you wait out your 2 weeks with your permit, you go take your test, and voila, you're done for $25 instead of $2,500, right?
Right.
So that's certainly something we are pushing heavily. If you have anyone who's on the fence, if you are an owner and you have buses, learn how to drive them, because
I know that sounds kind of weird, but I know what you mean.
get on my soapbox for a minute. You know, I've had idiots work for me, as I'm sure everyone here has. And sometimes you have to fire an idiot, right?
Yeah,
So if you
yeah.
can bring the bus back yourself, or finish the trip, or take it to the shop, or whatever, now is the time to do it, right? If you've been sitting on the fence as an owner that doesn't have a CDL, if you own CDL vehicles, just get it done before February. Save yourself the time and partner up with someone that knows to knock it out. But
I'll
same
remember
thing
that
for
if I
your driver.
decide to put any on the fleet.
Did they
Yeah.
shoot down the idea of 9+ for CDL?
No.
No.
The last update I had, and I don't follow politics super close, but this one obviously I have been. It is still in a pending, not approved bill stage. Given the state you live in, expect that to happen at some point within the next few years, whether it's federal or not. So it's already the rule in California. Illinois tends to follow California's lead a few years behind with most regulations. So that will be a thing in Illinois. I feel pretty confident saying in the not too distant future. Right now, it only applies to New Jersey and California.
I think one of the bigger issues that I'm seeing right now is that bus drivers have the option to drive trucks, to drive all sorts of other commercial motor vehicles. Typically, and they really didn't have that option before as much as they do now. And the cost, what they can earn doing that, creates they can earn more doing that than they can as a bus driver. I mean, there's companies, as you said, there's companies that are paying, I haven't heard 95, but I mean, I've heard, you know, where they're hiring people at, you know, $30, $35 an hour. And it's punch in, punch out, $35 an hour. I think our price point's going to need to change based on what salaries are going to be. And we've already started doing it, paying drivers more. I mean, I've got some corporate shuttles that we do, and one of these companies operates trucks that deliver food to the aircraft. And as my drivers are going in, and it's an O'Hare shuttle, right? As they're going in, we're paying the drivers $18 to $20 an hour, which for an O'Hare shuttle is actually pretty good, right? Most of the people that are doing that right now that have to have contracts with the airport are working that market are doing like $16 to $18 an hour. You know, so $18 to $20, a little over $20 an hour was a very respectable pay scale until they started pulling into my customers' locations where they're doing their shuttles and seeing giant freaking banners that say, you know, starting at $22 an hour plus benefits. And I mean, it basically took all of my payroll in those markets and raised it up. I mean, if I had people that weren't looking for new work, maybe they wouldn't have seen that. But now that they're pulling into this thing and they're seeing that, they can go to work for, one of our customers and earn more than they're earning with us.
Well, remember I told you about the garbage truck company in DuPage County that's starting at $40 an hour for driving a garbage truck, plus
Right.
benefits and vacation. That was a few months ago, and I think you were shocked then too. But it's clearly competitive.
Well, to Tracy's point, I think the issue is rates, right? So when I started in the industry, the average rate for an airport transfer was about $100. Today, the average rate for an airport transfer is about $100. And the vehicle costs have gone up 50%. Payroll costs have gone up at least 25%. Insurance costs have gone up at least 25%. And so we didn't increase rates. I mean, let's be serious. The people that you're hauling make more than most of the people on this call, right? Even your poorest client probably has a higher net income than most limo company owners. And so I think this fear to raise rates is kind of self-induced because there are IOs that'll do it for $60. And so it's that differentiation that's one of the big conversations when I talk to people, right? Like I get the joy of flying into clients all over the country, and some of them are on the cheap end and some of them are on the very high end. And I just want a good, safe ride to the hotel, right? Like, so that kind of business may not be really the future of the industry, because are they really willing to pay $140 to get an airport transfer if the IO will do it $60? But focusing more on the luxury aspect of it and those higher net worth individuals, so aiming for less volume with higher margins, I think is, in my opinion, the safer route to go, because a billionaire doesn't care that you're $150 instead of $50, right? But a guy that makes 150 grand might, and a purchasing department for a corporate client definitely does. And so I think that traditional market of going after the bulk airport transfers at $100 each is just going to dwindle. Who wants to make $3 on that trip? I'd rather not do it.
Absolutely.
Kind of my personal.
The other thing that's a really big indicator is I was talking to Paula this morning, and she's running this class that does chauffeur license training. She's got what do we got, 32 students this weekend?
33 tomorrow, but who's counting?
And you know what? We've been running ads and Indeed, and we're spending thousands of dollars a month trying to attract people in, and there aren't that many people with chauffeur's license walking in the door applying, or CDLs applying. I mean,
Right.
First off, some are better off on unemployment than working, but beyond that, now part of the unemployment ended, and you'd expect to see a big influx into the market, and we're really not seeing it. But yet her classes are bigger than they've ever been. Definitely an indication of where things are headed.
Yeah, but Paula, where are they heading to? Are they with current companies, or are they doing it because of rideshare?
They're doing, some are doing it because of rideshare. Some are already working for operators who have finally kicked these guys in the butt and said, no more suburban licenses. I want you all to have city licenses. So we're seeing some of that. We, interestingly enough, about a third of them did not renew their licenses on time. And with the law, with the 12 months, they had to start over. So we've had at least 2 or 3 every class that have to start over. I had a couple call yesterday. So, but I think it's important to point out, we have a major language problem, because this last class, about 40% of them were Asian and could not speak English very well at all. And I've talked to the city about it, and they're like, well, how are they passing the exam? I go, they memorized the book. So we either make it harder, but they're like, well, if someone calls and complains about them, we'll remove them. And that's not really making me too happy. But a lot of them are working together in Asian groups. And so they figure they can hang out together and get work that way. So they're already hooked into black card groups and WhatsApp or what have you. So, because I've talked to a few of them, In fact, my last class, I think 3 of them are going to get a car. So it's a little bit of everything. And interestingly enough, probably in every class, we've had 3 or 4 people with a CDL. This last class, we had one, but he vehemently said, I do not want to drive a bus. I am so tired of driving a bus. So I said, okay, but that's the first time that's happened. But yeah, it's a mixed bag. And I heard taxis also picking up. I have not been able to check with my counterparts, but rumor has it that taxis also increasing the number of people, because my partner that does the fingerprinting is seeing a lot more. He's seeing like 10 to 20 a week for fingerprints. So
Well, Paula, has the city revised any of the regulations or requirements for the PVL licensing? Is it still on a 2-year renewal?
it's still on a 2-year renewal, and they're not changing that. What they have changed is they have offered some additional incentives for the wheelchair taxis, and then a few other things, PPE for the taxi medallion owners, stuff like that, subsidies. But the major thing that they did that affects limo and taxi is they started to relax the background check requirements. I don't have them in front of me, but I'll give you the short answer. So normally certain felonies would be at 5 years before you could actually apply for a license. So a DUI, let's use a DUI because that's the most common one. So if they're doing the background check, they saw a DUI, they'd say, is this 5 years or more old? And if it was, no problem, they let them get their license. If not, they would hold them back. Now they went to 3 years. And that's not just our licensing, that's taxi and a bunch of other licenses that the city issues. They're doing that as a humanitarian type of or job. They're trying to improve equity in hiring because they feel that they did some studies and found that they felt there was some discrimination against certain groups because they had a higher issue of conviction, a higher percentage of convictions in certain ethnic groups. And they felt that the licensing was presenting an unfair advantage to them. So that went into effect in August. I talked to Art about it at length because initially I was concerned about it, but I think we on reflection, our insurance and everything else will dictate the proper background check requirements. So we didn't push back on it at all because it really wasn't for us to push back on. But other than that, the rest of the changes, the bus ordinance changes and stuff like that helped, but there's no changes to the training.
Apologies for being out of touch on the local scene as much, but has there been a change of the requirement for the TNC drivers? Like
No, they still have to be licensed too.
Todd Roberts.
Yeah.
Join the meeting.
So their licensing hasn't changed at all.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, one of my questions, generally was been what people are seeing in terms of the industry. After, last March of 2020, when we went from normal life down to maybe 5% of normal, what kind of recovery have people experienced, businesses or markets? I mean, a percentage recovery, are people up to 20, 25 or better? Just want to see what kind of, and what do you think? I think, it was raised earlier, what Tracy said, what kind of shape and form is the industry going to assume? And those are two of the questions I would have, what people's thoughts are on that.
Well,
I mean, let's say I was with a company in Dublin, Ireland. We were doing about 150 trips a day, went down to maybe 3 or 4 a week, and it slowly crept back up. I don't know, I'm no longer associated, but people, had other disastrous results after, the March shutdown. How much of your business has recovered, and what do you see?
well, I think what we're seeing is we do about 40% of our work is outside Chicago.
Mhm.
And what we're finding is when we have work in other cities, we're calling our affiliate, or in our affiliates calling us, checking availability. And there's many times when we don't have availability or they don't have availability. And it's just something that has to be understood at this point. I mean, it's, if you don't have it, you don't have it. I think that's something that's changed. It was at a point where we can get something covered anywhere at any point at any time, including Chicago. You could always, take a group and find numerous, cars out there, affiliates to work with you and get it covered. And so much has changed. There's so much work that we've turned away.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
how-
To Art's point and to Chuck, to your point, for the first time since COVID started, our Labor Day weekend, we were at about 92% of 2019 Labor Day. So that was great to see. But as far as our regular work, other than that Labor Day weekend, we're just starting to approach 70% for the very first time of 2019. But for the longest time, we're just hovering at the 50–60%. But I think we broke through that 70% finally. And we're a little bit leery, with the Delta variant. Is that going to continue on to September? September looks really, really good. We've just had some smaller groups that have been canceling because of Delta, but nothing big yet. So we're just very optimistic that it's going to remain. However, we do know that, our September, which looks great, could easily fall off very, very quickly. And so this week and next week, we're watching that closely. To Art's point, as far as affiliate work, across the nation, I mean, exactly what he said is, you can't find availability. It's the exact same thing that we're turning down. We are staging additional vehicles just for our larger affiliates and just make sure we have some extra cars on standby. So there's a cost to doing that. But then, as far as trying to find coverage elsewhere, it's very, very difficult, and you can't go by the rates that you were used to. So you do have to call every single one of them and say, okay, what is your rate? Because their rates are changing daily, weekly than what you were used to just 3 months ago.
Well, that's good information. And the question that occurred to me with Art, when Art was speaking, as well as you, Tracy, is that, you say that oftentimes you call and an affiliate has no availability. Well, is that affiliate at 20%, 50%, 85% of their former fleet size? So what kind of capabilities do they have today compared to 16 months ago? So, to be out of cars, your 5-car fleet is a little bit of a different scenario than when you're out of cars when you're a 75-car fleet. So I don't know how much, people have contracted over.
Chuck, I think typically what you're seeing, established companies are running at 40–50% of their fleet. It's hard to get past that just because they can't get the people they need to do it.
Well,
So
and you're not able to get the IOs that you once were able to get. I mean, at one point we were running over 300 IOs. And I think right now we're just over I think we just broke over 120. So just our IO portion of what we used to run with, that's cut in half pretty easily, just because they have their own work now, and you have to work around their schedules. They're coming to you.
Or they're
Chicago's
gone.
an IO market. Yeah, they're gone, but now they're coming to you, and we are working around their schedules. So it's really interesting how that has done an about face, and I don't think we're going to see that change. And then the other thing that we might have time to talk to, and I know it's going to be a topic at the Dallas show. It's one that I'm working on. And I know dynamic pricing is scary for everyone to think about. However, yield management. So with these reduced fleets and limited resources, COVID didn't teach us anything. It definitely has taught us that we do have limited resources. You can't just call 5 companies next door and find yourself a car. Like that the last 3 months, you can't do that anymore. And that's happening across the nation. Before everyone could say, oh, you know what, I'll just call my local competitors. We all pass work to one another. Nobody has vehicles available. And if they have the vehicles, they don't have the chauffeurs. So now is it time that we seriously start looking at yield management, and we don't just do it for Super Bowls and Ryder Cup and Lollapalooza, but you're doing it on a daily or a weekly basis, because we have limited resources. The exact same as what an airline does, as what a hotel does. Every single service or product that you buy is yield management or dynamic pricing based on supply and demand. Our industry is the only one that will approach you and say, here's a rate sheet for the next 12 months. what other service do you know that does that besides a utility company? So it may be time that our industry starts looking at that, and black car is probably the most difficult to do it. However, our technology platforms do have the capability, but couldn't we start with our buses and our limo buses and our limousines, you know, those vehicles that are easier to manage, to get used to the concept of doing that on a daily basis?
You know, the other thing you're going to see though, with all of these people going to school and getting licensed and buying their own cars, they're doing it because of the rates that were available doing Uber trips over the last months where they just didn't have enough cars. Once that markets get flooded with cars, the rates are going to go down. Their rates are going to go down. And what you're going to have is you're going to have a bunch of people in the market that are just undercutting everything all the time, every day. I mean, they've got the car in their driveway, and all they've got is a car note and insurance and whatever they're going to make.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't mean to be the Debbie Downer, but we also have another problem, which I personally think is getting worse. We have a number of people, and I've had operators call me and say, "Don't call me anymore because I took my plates off. I'm going rogue." And they're out there hustling at the airport and doing all kinds of stuff. Now, we always have that issue because it's a worldwide problem, but there are operators who are getting.
I just want to interrupt you there. That for every single person on this call, that's our responsibility to turn them in. That something happens with one of those vehicles, and that puts a blemish on our entire industry, and that is not fair to do that to the industry. And so anyone sees that, it's got to be called in. If you're disobeying the law and you're running rogue like that, our industry has a tough enough time to get things done and to be profitable. The last thing we need is something tragic like that to happen. Like, those got to be called in, and everybody's got to do their part.
I missed that. What does going rogue mean? Does that mean no insurance, or what is going rogue? Not licensed? What is that?
They'll either impersonate as Uber, and they'll stick an Uber sticker on their car. And that does not necessarily mean they have insurance with Uber, but they can go through the airport. No one's going to stop them. Who the hell is going to check their plate?
So a low life is imitating a low life.
I guess you could say that. Some are legitimately Uber, but they're picking up black car. But they don't, they just don't have the insurance and all that. They're running on Uber insurance. So that's a problem.
I can see that as a problem. What I wanted to ask Tracy, you made a case, for this so-called surge or demand management. That's a fancy way to say. And how would you differentiate between long-term existing clients and I don't know what your mix is, whether you're transients, but I come from an old tradition. I'm an old dog, very dusty, and I've been around too long. I probably need to be put out to pasture. But
I love when he says that.
That really rubs me the wrong way from the standpoint of servicing long-term clients, and it's like abusing your existing customers that built a company.
So Chuck, with those same clients, how do you think that they get their rates for the next 12 months from the airlines? How do they negotiate their rates with their hotel properties? If they go to a Marriott and based on their volume that they've already proven, not volume that they promised, because we're guilty of that. If you tell me you're going to give us $500,000, we're going to give you a 10% discount, even though they haven't proven it. That's a whole nother discussion. However, when they go to a Hyatt or a Hilton in a Marriott, they're getting a discount based off of that daily rate. They're not getting a fixed rate for the whole year, no matter where you travel. They're getting a discount based off of the daily rate. Same with airlines. They're getting a discount because of their volume based off of the daily rate. Even if a corporate executive flying first class, even if he books a flight 2 months ago, that rate is going to be different for him than if he were to book it today. He'll still get a discount because of his volume and his negotiations with the airline. However, he's getting a discount based on the daily rate, the supply and demand of that airline. And so,
I understand the difference, Tracy, for sure. And it's a brave new world out there. Like I say, I just come from a different tradition, and that's probably a liability from my perspective. It's, you're
absolutely right. And it's not to say,
person. And that's the thing I'm trying to overcome.
No,
Uh,
you're absolutely right. And it's not, when I'm saying this, it's not to say that Windy City's doing it, because we also come from old school and it's very scary. And this isn't something that is going to happen overnight, or that's even going to happen in the next 6 months, 12 months. However, our industry definitely needs to start thinking about it, and and that's why I specifically said it's easier to start with your party buses. It's easier to start with your retail work. And so if you've got, let's just say mini coaches, if you got 10 mini coaches and now you have 5 left for the second weekend in October. So with those 5, you've got 5 left. Okay, my next one I'm going to sell for 10% higher. My fourth one I'm going to sell for 12% higher. My third one I'm going to sell for, and you can manually do that pretty easily. But just getting used to that concept. So when you start going into corporate, and again, these are my ideas. Windy City definitely is not partaking in any of this. I'm attempting to convince them as well, and I know it's going to be a struggle. However, why couldn't we start selling to our corporate accounts? Here's your range of pricing. Your range of pricing will always go between 90 and 110, and you'll never go over 110, and it's going to be between 90, but based on supply and demand, it's not always surge pricing. You might have a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning where you might be able to reduce your rates a little bit in order to keep vehicles moving. However, you're selling within a price range now, and you're selling at a discount based on that daily rate, not a fixed rate throughout the year. So how often are we leaving money on the table just because we have fixed rates? You can't go to a hotel and they're going to hand you, okay, here's our rates for the next 6 months. It's just not going to happen. And our customers are used to that. Rideshare has educated them. I think it's just something that we need to start opening our minds up to and being open to. And every single software provider has it in their system, but our industry has refused to adopt it. And now they're pretty excited that we're starting to talk about it again, because they've had this technology for us for yield management and based on our supply and demand with our vehicles throughout the day. So I'd encourage every one of you to talk to your software providers and see what they have available for you today, and just start it with a few of your vehicles. It doesn't have to be all of them.
I think overall,
Can I make a
it's
statement?
very smart to have that in your business plan, or to understand how that can be incorporated into your business plan. As long as it's well managed, I would have to agree with you, Tracy. Thanks.
Can I make a comment? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. One of the biggest things that I've seen in our industry, and for those that don't know me, I mean, I grew up around the industry. My dad back in the 80s used to work for George back at American Limousine. So I really, truly grew up around the industry. Our industry as a whole is afraid to always change our prices upward. We have no problem whatsoever giving discounts to teams, but we are afraid to raise our prices. And what ends up happening is we don't raise our prices, 4% or 5% a year. We wait 4 or 5 years and then jack them up 25 or 30%. That's where we lose clients. The little subtle increases of 3, 4, 5% because we're busier here, or even 10% on those high demand days. That's not going to cause us to lose clients. It's those sudden big jumps in our base rate, our normal rate, even before we do the dynamic pricing or the surge pricing or whatever you want to call it. That's where we lose customers. We're not losing our customers over $4. We're losing our customers over the $30 increase.
I just want to add, there's a funny story. What Tim just said about losing, we're so afraid to lose that one client, that one account, because that we increase our rates. I was just talking to Jay Ehrlich with Europe Limousine this past week, and he said, you know what? He goes, I used to be so scared that one client, like, oh my God, we're going to lose them. We got to do what we can to keep them. And he goes, but you know what? Brought it into perspective for me. He goes, in 2020, I lost every single client. He goes, today I'm making a profit. I've lost every single client. I'm used to it. I'm not scared of it anymore. And he goes, I'm making a profit.
So in
It's amazing.
2013, at R&R, we were one of the first companies really running any substantial amount of coaches with the limo service, right? So we had like 13 MCI J4500s, 11 of them were brand new and 2 of them were ancient, like, 2001 D series, just hideous buses, right? And when I first started there, we weren't really making any money, which is kind of a problem, right? And so what we looked at is what we could make per bus, and we took day rates. And, basically what we used to do the day rate was how many buses we had and what we thought we could get for it. And that was our dynamic pricing model. And we increased our average day rate from $1,000 a day to $1,600 a day, and people kept paying it. And we took those old D series and we put $10,000 into refurbishing them, redid a couple seats, slapped some paint on them, and they went out for $1,600 a day too. And you know what? The customers didn't care. And what we realized is we went in and we raised our prices almost 30%, and our gross revenue went down drastically, but our net income went up. So we were doing less work for more money. And when it came to the buses, bus companies have been doing this forever. I mean, if you talk to your local bus companies and you go, or they try to farm work out to you because they underbid it, which happens all the time. Well, can you do this one for $500? Well, that means they underestimated their demand, right? So it's not always a win. Sometimes it bites you in the backside a little bit, but you can increase your average daily rate because you don't, I'm not going to say everyone, but in general, you don't have 200 buses to sell, right? You're not, Lamer's Bus Lines trying to book 1 million buses. If you got 3 of them and they're the last 3 buses in town, guess what? They're expensive 3 buses. And either you book them or you walk. And they're not going to walk. And if they are, they're not the customer for you.
Yeah, and that same concept applies if you've got the 3 vehicles. You're going to have your exceptions with your corporate accounts, but those of you that are running like 1 to 5 vehicles or 1 to 10 vehicles, the same thing. On a Thursday afternoon, you've got your corporate accounts. Okay, you already negotiated those rates. You have to stick to those. I understand that. However, when you have your individual travelers coming through, those are the ones like, okay, I've got 3 vehicles left on Thursday between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. You can up the percentage of those 3 vehicles that are left for those new callers that call in. Because if you're booked up, the rest of the industry is probably just as booked.
Related challenge though is with cancellations, right? So the cancellation policy in this industry is the most forgiving I've ever seen in my life. So my cancellation policy was 50% up front. I take it off the road, I'm taking 50% of your money. If you don't book it, great, don't book it. And what we realized is when we were looking at DMCs, especially, they're the worst offenders, is they book an entire group, take all your crap off the board, and then the group cancels with them, and now you're left holding the bag. Once you have the deposit you want, then you book with me, or you take the gamble, right? That's why you get to upcharge my rates, is because you're taking that gamble. But if I'm taking it off it's not bad to charge deposits and all this stuff about, well, I don't charge them till after, and what if there's an overage? Look, I'm a customer. Run my card. If a customer cares if you charge their card before or after, it's because they don't have $100. Let's be real. I mean, especially when we're talking about an airport transfer, even if it's 100 of them, run my card.
Yeah, and don't make it hard for your customer to give you money.
Oh, I just traveled with one that made me pay in the car.
Really?
So irritating.
I didn't know we even did that anymore.
That's still a thing. And
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's in everybody's market, but Curb Mobility has been is supporting our taxis, and they're one of the approved providers for taxi. And they just started a program where they're actually, you can, I have to go back and read some more about it, but it's really interesting. Instead of just hopping in a cab and letting them run the meter, they're giving prearranged prices up front. So now it's $10, and then they can swipe their card or whatever, scan it, and they can add the tip. And that's pretty much it. It's about as close to cashless as they can get. But what's interesting is they've taken it a step further and saying, you know what? Rather than having someone get in the car and hope it's going to be the same rate that they paid 3 days ago to go to the United Center, this way there's no guessing. This is the rate. It's kind of interesting. They've been doing it for 2 months.
Well, speaking of payment, is what about having, and staying away from cash? So again, COVID has taught us to stay away from
Mhm.
cash and cash app payments and what have you. But not only the cash payments for the company side of it, but what about having a QR code in order to tip your chauffeur? So
Yeah,
if
I
there's a
like that.
QR code somewhere or on the bus, there's QR codes. And if you just want to give another $2, $3 to the chauffeur based off of your cash app, I found myself getting my nails done, or I was on a bus in Milwaukee and I don't carry cash, and I was able to give him another $5 or $7 just because the QR code was up there.
Well, and making it easy, right? So like I just flew into a market recently and I'm gonna book a car. And so I hop onto my clients' websites. I have multiple clients in the market. And I'm always the last minute guy. So I'm booking, midnight and I'm coming in. I have a Chihuahua who is defending my honor against the FedEx man right now.
Oh, okay.
So
As well she should.
I'm flying in and, I'm the guy at midnight booking for 7 a.m. Well, I'm not texting my client. I'm just going to book through the website. Right.
Right.
And one of them's like, well, are you north of this street or south of this street? Hell, I don't know. I don't live there. Right.
Oh my God.
And then I go to the next one and it's like, put in all your contact info to get a price. No, I just want to book a car. Like the amount of effort that goes into getting a price is crazy. And I looked at 4 different clients in the market and only one allowed me to get a quote, click a button and book. One of them wanted me to call a human being because it was within 24 hours. I'm just not going with you. And so that convenience is the expectation of the customer now, that I can book at midnight. I might not get a special deal. It's not the same as if I text my client, I'm like, hey, I'm coming to see you next week, right? And they'll probably hook me up with a VIP guy and all this garbage because I don't care. That's when I got to it. I finally got around to doing it, right? So creating that expectation for these guys to be able to book easily, to make it simple, right? I should be able to, if I'm a corporate traveler, literally just forward you my itinerary. When I would travel out of Phoenix with, the guys at Driver Provider, they know where I live. They know how early I want to be picked up. That's all in my profile. I don't need to have a conversation with literally anyone. Forward my itinerary, please take care of it. End of conversation, right? And you got a card, you bill me, you set up when to pick me up, you know where I live and where I want to go back to, unless I tell you different. So we need to create that ease of convenience. And I'm willing to pay extra for that. And so are our customers, right? So don't be afraid to charge more, but don't make their life hard in the process. Don't make them figure out where they're going. If you can't load in the hotel locations, then build zones, something, instead of this crazy price model where I don't, especially when I don't care if it's plus or minus $5, just take my card.
Yeah.
And let's move on. So that was something I just saw recently, and it was super irritating as a customer. As
a former road warrior, I find the whole thing fascinating because I think somebody mentioned earlier about, how will the culture in corporations change as far as, travel and per diems and stuff. And honestly, it's due to change. I mean, I'm already talking to a few travel planners from some companies that I know, and they're taking a hard look at expenses because even though they're not starting to travel yet, they're trying to get a handle on, they know things are going to cost more. I don't think, are they going to push people into taxis and rideshare? No, I'm not saying that, but I think they're going to take a hard look at what overall travel expenses are and make serious decisions on travel based on the requirement for that person to be on. Are you an essential employee to the client? So like for a lot of ours are consultants. So are you essential? Can you do your work from home as opposed to being on site? I know I was a very high-end consultant and I had to be on the ground for my projects. Yeah, of course I was an independent at that time, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think they're going to make some tough decisions. Before, it was not unusual to have, some of our members would call and say, you know what, I usually do work at this company, and we just drove by and there's Uber sitting there waiting for our clients. And that was that was what we dealt with before, but now with the interest of safety and all that and the risk situation for these, work companies, and the minute they start putting people to travel, their whole risk model changes too, because we're not past this variant yet. So anyone who is putting their people out to travel has to deal with that as well. So
Well, business travel right now really isn't happening yet.
now,
If I look at our reservations and look at what type of airport work we're doing, over 50% of it is private aviation.
Yep.
Companies that have people, flying commercial, it's really not happening. A lot of offices are closed. People aren't back in the office yet. They start to go back and change it. So I think that we're a little ways off.
yeah, so do I.
This pricing model that Tracy brought up, I don't know that in our industry, I don't think you can do it for corporate. We're not doing it for corporate, but we are doing it for leisure, as she talked about. We've been doing that. Although we've taken kind of the opposite approach. We look at a date when we're busy and we go to a higher rate to book, higher rate, and we're getting at higher rate. But if somebody called me today and wanted a bus for tomorrow and I had one bus left, I'd be more inclined to make it a little bit cheaper and book that bus, provided I have a driver to drive it. And make sure that we get the booking and we're running it at full volume with our fleet. So I don't know.
And
I hate
that's
that.
that's kind of the polar opposite of this whole pricing thing. I mean, because
Right.
it says yield management says, well, if you got a vehicle and someone wants it and it's the only one left, you should be raising the price. So it's going to be a cultural change, I think, too, on top of
So it
it.
goes in both directions, though.
Mhm.
So, to Arthur's point, right? The day before, the odds of me booking that are really low if I only got one left, right?
Right.
Or day of, for that example, I already got a car sitting at the airport. Well, I might take a ride cheaper out. But if it's 2 weeks before, so to
Yeah,
do
you
dynamic
can get a
pricing-
higher rate because
Yeah,
you're going to try and book everything at that higher rate. And now as you're getting closer, now you need to fill your fleet. And so you kind of take the opposite approach.
yeah. So there's
It's
a
weird. And it's
threshold.
difficult. It's actually from when going back to what Chuck said, it isn't something that I was totally in favor of doing. And it's something that I would see as a shoddy service, like a company that raises their rate and lowers the rate. And it's like a shoddy company, but I don't think that is anymore. I think that the market's changed and it's just where it's at now.
I agree, Art, and I think it's so hard. I keep thinking about how do you manage that? How do you manage your sales team, your reservations team? Is it all done? Is it all automated? I mean, how do you advertise or communicate the different rates, within your organization when they're in the client interface? I mean, that's the challenge for me. That's the challenge that I look at, and just don't know quite how Chris or anybody else that's implemented that business model is implementing that. And by the way, is it Shabilsky?
It is Shabilsky.
Okay, thanks.
And so I was doing it for our coaches, but old school, right? We had 13 coaches, coach quotes come to me, right? And now we build software for compliance and all that. And so looking at it from a software standpoint, I don't think our limo software is set up to do it properly, any of them. And I've used all of them except Fast Track and Hudson. So the way it should work in a perfect world is sort of a bell curve, right? So if you book early and I have 50 vehicles left, the price is low. When you get to that middle tier and I have, let's say, 10 vehicles left, the price is high. And then when you get to close to the event and, night before, and I have a vehicle left, the price is low. And that's what happens with airline tickets. That's what happens with hotels, right? It's sort of a curve. And to build that into software is absolutely possible, right? What you would do is look at your business and you would set your curve. I'm likely to book this if I book it by this time period, right? And I have X number and I want X percentage. But that software to create that dynamic pricing, I don't think exists in our industry. And I think it needs to, because to do it the way I did it is not practical, right? Ours was more of a 13 vehicles, sure, right? I can make a quote if I get an extra $500 for it, that's worth my time. But it doesn't make sense when you get into smaller vehicles and you're not talking day rates and you're talking an hourly, like, is it worth your time to prepare a quote that gets you an extra $12? Probably not. So I think one of the things that we related to this that we've done a bad job of is we've let our software companies get away with being stagnant. Software development should always be an ongoing thing. No software is done.
They're not even all talking to each other yet. Let's go there.
No. That's on my list of pet peeves as well, right? Any software provider that tells you their program is done has given up.
Yeah.
And you should be looking for a different partner.
Well,
Software-
either that or they're not communicating the ideas or the concepts you were just talking about, Chris. I mean, we have to communicate to them what we're seeing or what we need before they can deploy development resources. So it is a two-way street.
It is, and one of the challenges is that, and there's about 1 million new software since COVID that I'm not aware of whether they're good or not. I see pop up all the time.
Tons.
Yeah, they could be great, they could be awful. I have no input. But I think we don't push back hard enough, and one of the reasons is we've allowed them to make it very difficult to change, right? Anyone here who has done a software changeover knows what a flaming nightmare it is. Yeah, it's
Several $1 million worth of changes. Yes.
Yes, it sucks a lot. Training
Mhm.
your staff, getting your clients moved over, things don't go into the right fields. I'm on this one and that one.
Mhm.
And so you're sort of captive, right? You're married to your software provider once you pick one, and they know that. And are you willing to go through a divorce over that feature?
Changing bartenders, I suppose, huh?
But that's a very real problem what Chris brings up. I mean, I come from tech anyway, but I mean, I worked with health insurance claims, which are much more complicated than reservations by a long shot. Add HIPAA to the mix and then you could really have a good old time. But the cost of conversion is huge. The cost of cutover is huge. I was telling Tracy last week about how, like, I did a project years ago. We ran because we were moving a data center, which sounds like not a big deal, but a data center like from whatever it was to North Dakota took 3 months of redundancy, which meant my client had to pay over $1 million for redundancy and wanted to shoot me. But that had to be done because there's no matter what you do, you have to be prepared. And I think there's a fear even on the smaller scale because we have a lot of people who you can read the comments in groups and you can tell who has a handle on technology and who does not.
Well, the flip side is we're such a small industry, right?
Mhm.
So it's not all on the software providers, right? So one, we
Yep.
have to have a cohesive vision of how it should work. And one of the challenges with this industry is if I did an analysis of each company on this call, you probably each do pricing a little different. You probably each call things different things and want different fields. And so that's very expensive to implement. And so what is more useful to go to a provider is a user group and say, okay, let's have a focus group. Let's look at how this feature should work and then ask for it. Because they don't want to implement 1,000 different features to do one thing 1,000 different ways. It doesn't make sense. You don't spend enough money with them. We're not a big enough industry for that.
Well, that's a very important statement because you have to get them all to want to work together. But when your use case is consistent across everybody, that life is easier for the developer. But I mean, even companies, I mean, we were an IBM partner where I last worked, and taking hundreds of people from different parts of the country and all trying to get them to say the same thing is hard. But at least, if that works, then the pricing could definitely be done, and, everybody would understand what those dynamics were. It's a small industry, but they have to have those standards, because it's too expensive to just build it specifically for Tracy and then go to Art and build what he wants. And then you can't, that would be such a big cost, but.
There's a lot of commonality, though. I mean, a last name field is a last name field, a license plate field
Right.
is a license. So there is a lot of consistency. Certainly there is, requirements, different, like how we handle our airport fees in Chicago is probably different than what they do in Denver, but, those are still, there's a lot of custom, development, but typically if a functionality works for you, Paula, it's likely, from a sales perspective, that it might work for Tracy or somebody in San Diego or Sao Paulo, for that matter. So
Yeah.
I think that, a smart developer is going to use ideas that are good and incorporate them into his overall package, as long as the development, and if there is significant development costs because it's something special, then, that's going to be reflected in the cost of that one client.
I wanted to, before people start going, because we're at 10 after 11, but I'm sure they'll stay a while. I'm real curious as to if anyone on here has raised their rates, and if they have, how many times in the last 6 months or so, and what percentage have you raised? I can go first. I know, it does feel like we just got started.
Yeah, we're at 15%. We've had 2 increases, and both of them added together have amounted to 15% right now.
I'm at 6% sedan transfers. I went up 20% on our SUVs, and we're going up again at the end of probably the middle of October. We're working on it right now.
Any pushback from anyone?
Nope. One affiliate, that was it.
Yeah.
Our clients are not pushing back at all. They're just happy if we can give them a ride. Seriously.
I'm actually shocked your affiliates are pushing back since they're in the same boat as you.
Affiliates are pushing back.
They are pushing back. I had one guy go, I see you changed your rate. I said, I see you still booked the trip. That stopped the conversation. I mean, I would have, I'm not going to sit here and justify it. If you don't want to use me, that's fine.
I mean, the problem now is, cars do break down, chauffeurs do call in. So when you're across the nation and all of a sudden that affiliate can't cover that ride, and because we're out of supply, there you stand without covering that ride, and you try to call around, you are definitely going to lose money.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I think we raised we're up 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that's fuel, and that's probably not enough.
No, and I think, we're holding off on the whole labor thing because, I think it was Art that alluded to it a little bit earlier, but as far as labor, those costs have obviously increased. And we're kind of thinking, after September 4th, when the kicker was done for unemployment, that, that it would start to level out a little bit and that we'd start to bring people back where we need them. And I know, granted, it's only been a week. I think we're on our 2nd week right now.
Definitely.
So maybe it will still level out. I'm not sure, but if it
We're seeing a
continues the
little
way it
bit.
has been, you're going to have to do another increase just to support your labor costs that have increased.
So Tracy, I work with some entertainer bus operators as well, like guys who take, Brad Paisley around, stuff like that. About, 2 years ago, the day rate was about $200 to $250 for the driver plus per diem. Got up to $500. I was on a phone call yesterday. $800 a day plus per diem now for some of these entertainer bus drivers a day.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
For the driver only, I mean, say that again?
Yeah, so the driver, so this is for entertainer buses, like guys who take, bands around.
Mhm.
Yeah.
2 years ago, the day rate was about $200 to $250 for the driver plus per diem. They got to $500. Now it's $800. And they still can't find enough drivers.
Yeah,
And that's a
it's real.
I-
And you think about that amount of an increase and how quickly your profit will evaporate if you sit on it.
Yeah.
So if you're not in line, and like right now, we're kind of sitting on it right now. And if it doesn't, come into play in the next 3 or 4 weeks where you're able to bring that back into line, you have no choice, because otherwise your profit is just quickly evaporating, because it's not a 1-2% increase.
Yeah.
I mean, it's much more than that.
You know what,
I'm
too,
in
and
the heart of the
current-
city and our gas prices are, I just saw for super premium, we're at $4.40. $4.40. If we go
So the-
if we go 2 miles up the road north, for some of you who live around here, Evanston, it's $3. It's just under 4. You should see the lines. People are
Yeah.
doing that extra 2 miles to save 50 cents, and you can't really blame them, but the fuel
And
is
go to
fluctuating.
Indiana or Wisconsin.
Huh?
And go to Indiana or Wisconsin to avoid the taxes on top of it. But-
Absolutely.
Well, what, are you still doing fuel surcharges? Are people still deploying, implementing that in their pricing structures?
Yes,
I
Is
have.
it a sliding, is it a sliding scale fuel surcharge, or is it a standard 5% or whatever you're doing?
well, we went to 6%,
Uh-huh.
and it's supposed to be a sliding scale, but we haven't slid it anywhere yet.
So it's a stuck scale, not a sliding scale. But
Yeah, because
aren't you doing the sliding scale? I thought you told me you guys were trying to do a sliding scale. I couldn't remember.
Yeah, we have the sliding scale, same as art, that we haven't moved it at all, but it is in there and we're starting to put it in all of our contracts. However, with the increase in the base rate to 15%, then obviously your fuel's increasing with that as well.
So for those
We
of
kind of just
you,
kept our fuel the way it was, but we're increasing our base rate, which naturally increases the percentage of the fuel.
are you able to do that on an off cycle with your contract? Or are you waiting for your renewal, your review, contract?
No,
review time?
we are renegotiating everything. So just like when COVID happened, we went through and dismantled all of our vendor agreements and renegotiated all of our vendor agreements. Is now 2021, we're renegotiating all of our corporate contracts. And they all expect it.
Prior to the date of expiry or what?
Yes,
How are you getting away with that? Educate me, Tracy.
they expect it. There's no way you can have double-digit increases in your insurance and your fuel and your labor, and they don't expect you to come back. I mean, some of them, yeah, it takes 5, 6, 7 phone calls and to state your case and going back and forth. And some we can't renegotiate as well as others, but we're definitely going back to all of them and saying, look, we need to look at this. And all of them have said, yeah, we understand. So it's just a matter of what you're able to negotiate, but every single one of them have been open to negotiating.
So one of the real things is that if they're not open to negotiating, you're losing money on the contract. You're better
Right.
off losing
Without a
money.
doubt.
Let them go.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Then we're going to implement the cancellation clause. Unfortunately, we literally can't. As much as we love having your business,
Yeah.
we can't do it at a loss. And if they don't get that, they're not a good partner. You
No.
make $1 million and lose 10%. That's not a good contract.
Yeah, you don't have the resources to cover them right now, so it's got to be profitable. You cannot be losing money on them. And the way the contracts were written in 2019 or prior, and for today's expenses, you're losing money on those contracts.
Mhm.
So if they're not willing to negotiate in line with what's happening today, because it's happening to their businesses too. The first questions you ask is like, you get on the call ready to negotiate your contract. And the first questions you ask is, oh my gosh, what are you as a corporation? What are you doing with your labor concerns? How are you handling, your shipping costs and the increase in fuel, and get them talking about their increase in expenses. Now, all of a sudden yours just seem like, oh yeah, you have it too. Because every single company has an increase in cost right now.
Understood, but
Agree.
there's somebody out there that's going to say contract is a contract, honor it or whatever, but I'm glad.
Every single one of them have an out clause.
Good. Well,
And you can't lose money. You can't send chauffeurs on something where the chauffeur's losing money and where the company's losing money. It's a no-win for anybody, because all of a sudden you can't get chauffeurs to cover it.
I'm gonna have to bite my tongue, Tracy. I have a tendency on occasion to be glib, but I'm gonna really fight the urge to say something silly.
I just want to be here a year from now.
I know.
I don't want to be out of business.
Well, Art, I was going to ask you, you're talking about these rate things. I mean, when I started sedan, a town car was $13 an hour, airport transfer for minimum. So it was $26 and the tip was $3.90. you know, so I date myself, but it's a whole different ballgame out there, and not only with the, you know, pricing structures, but with demands and everything else. It's a challenging environment.
You know, what's happening too right now is you're getting people calling, corporate customers calling, they're coming out of the woodwork and they're just happy that you're there.
Yeah. Seriously.
And we've picked up business in other markets that we didn't have before because whoever they were using in that market is gone. You know, so we'll have people calling and saying, you know, can you help us in DC? The company we had DC is gone.
Yeah.
So it's a whole.
And locally, it's happening even more than most people on this call even
Yeah,
realize.
we're not negotiating any existing contracts because our contracts were never that thin where we need to do that. I mean, our markup for out of town is like 38%. Actually, it's more than that. It's like 41% now. So everything.
Affiliate work? For affiliate work?
Outside of Chicago, yeah. I mean, we've got a strong markup and the client base that we have is willing to pay it. I mean, we're doing all the background work to make sure that things go well and we're using good suppliers. But knock on wood, we don't have a client base that's incredibly price conscious. So, I mean, we have a little more flexibility maybe than some other people might have.
That's a result out of trust in a long-term relationship.
Yeah, and you know, they know what we're doing. They know exactly what we're doing. They know what our markup is. They know what we're doing in the background. And that markup is generally based on a discounted rate anyway. So where we may be marking it up 41%, we may only be marking it up 25% or you know 30% because we're getting a discount off of the existing rate.
Yeah, but that's not pure profit. I mean, you're doing a lot of work. You've got 20, 30, well, Art, in your case, you've got 45, 40, no, I'm just kidding. You've got 20 years of hard work to put that affiliate network together. And that is consistent with the same service that you have here. So when you're looking at a 41% markup, it becomes a convenience fee to the customer.
You're still competing with other companies. There's a lot of companies in the market that are sending work all over the country and they're working at a 20% markup. So you're competing with whoever's out there, if you're even competing at all, because as I said, you know, you build these, as Chuck said, you build these relationships, and the relationships aren't with me. The relationships are with Lisa that answers the phone, or Liz that answers the phone, or Cindy or Diane. They answer the phone. They don't even know who I am. They don't care who I am.
Yeah.
They can care less. They just know that they're going to talk to this person, and this person's going to make it happen and make it smooth. You know, I went to a thing years ago, and it's something I'd love to, and I don't have enough staff to do it now. But I'd love to incorporate is I went to a thing called NetJets 101. And we flew out, and well, actually we drove, and we spent the day in this room going over how NetJets operates. And it's really kind of cool. What they do is they have groups, and these groups know all of their customers. And so there might be 5 people in a group, a gold group, a green group, a silver group. And when that customer calls in, the call gets routed to that group, and that group knows that customer. And there's a leader of the group that actually is responsible for sales for that customer. And every other customer that group is getting, or every other customer is getting routed to their group. And it's kind of interesting in the way that they operate. And it's the same thing that Savoya Limousine did. They created these groups, and they're able to monitor. I mean, at this point in time, I don't have the luxury of being able to really monitor each individual customer and mine that customer for more and more and more business. But the way these guys are structured, they're able to do that. I think that there's a lot of things that we're going to see in the future that we're going to need to maybe change if we can. But I don't know. It's a tough market.
What do you guys do about customers who try to take advantage of your affiliate network and go directly with the affiliates and get a different price?
Well, you know what? Typically what ends up happening, if you have the right affiliate, they won't take the work,
Yep, agree with Art,
you
100%.
know?
I know.
And we had a
And you have
customer,
to do the same thing yourself too, that if you get calls from customers and you know they belong to an outside affiliate, you have to do the same thing. You have to return that call, turn them back over to the affiliate, but that's got to be a trust factor between you and that affiliate.
Without a doubt.
so we have a customer in New York that was basically using the service every day. And this guy was spending over $100,000 a year in just himself. And someone in the accounting department at this company researched everything and saw who he was using and saw that he was booking through us and saw our markup and forced him to go local in that market. And that's exactly what he did. And we kind of lost him in that market, but we still have him everywhere else. But I mean, it's what it is. And they're claiming that they'll be back because they'd rather book with us.
However, Art, what that affiliate should have done is give him the regular rate and still kick you back 10% at least.
Yeah.
You know what? We've done things with them where their customers have come to us and they didn't do that with us. So, I mean, we're each sending each other a lot of work and they, when the shoes were switched, they didn't nick us. They didn't want to commission back. So I just didn't want to do it. That's what it is. I mean,
So
you kinda
Joanne's
go-
trying to say something and
Go ahead.
keep quiet for a
Hi.
minute. I'm sorry,
We don't raise
Joanne.
hand-
Thank you.
Joanne, we
Oh,
don't raise hands here.
Now
I
that we're
thought she
talking
was
about
scratching her head. I
affiliates-
had no idea. I'm a jerk. Okay, sorry.
Now that we're talking about affiliates, I'd like to throw something out there for you
Mm.
that don't know me. I'm in New York City, but I love being on your call. You guys, I've learned so much from you over the last year. It's been fantastic. So I'll
And
start with
same
that.
here.
My question to throw out to you guys is, my driver got a call at JFK. He was picking up a passenger, and it was from an affiliate, not the affiliate that booked the trip with me. And this affiliate wanted to know what his driver's license was. He asked him to pull over, send a picture of the car, his plate, everything, or we were not getting paid. Because he has had problems in the past that he has farmed out to New York City and Uber has come to pick them up, whether they stick an Uber sticker in the window or what. They've come with no TLC plates, but regular plates that say Florida or some other southern state in JFK, because they let their TLC plates, they couldn't afford them anymore.
Yep.
Now, these aren't IOs, these are affiliate companies doing this.
Oh my God.
So I told my driver, I'll take care of it, because I have a picture of all the cars, the plates, everything, what the driver looks like. I sent everything to this affiliate. Then I contacted the affiliate that booked the trip with me, and the gentleman said to me, well, that wasn't told. I told him, he asked me the name of the affiliate that called the driver. He says, well, that's not the affiliate that sent me the trip. I said, what?
Ah,
Well, long story
Oh my
short, this
God.
trip was bombed out 5 times.
oh, Joanne.
And this has happened to me now 3 times in 2 weeks.
Well, I think, I understand that completely. That's another thing where the world has changed. People that are sending us work from other cities understand that we're basically managing the work. It may not be my current driver doing it. And if they choose to go somewhere, listen, in Chicago, they're hard pressed to find a company that owns the cars and employs the drivers anyways. Anywhere they go, it turns 99% of the time, it's a dispatch company that has a bunch of IOs running. So what's the difference between, calling that dispatch company that's running IOs or calling us where we can't handle it with our own fleet and we have an individual that owns a car and we still manage the ride? It's managing the transportation is what it's about.
But in this
yeah.
case, the original affiliate that booked the trip for their passenger is now very, very upset. The only good thing coming out of it is I'm getting more work because I'm the only one that's running the regular insurance. I have decent rates. I've only gone up 15%.
Right.
And
And our
you got 'em.
drivers are trained, our cars are TLC, and we sanitize. So I'm getting the extra work, but I can't believe this is happening in New York City. I mean, 5 times? I mean,
That's weird.
that's
It is
crazy.
weird.
Well, so let's
I've known
talk about the
anybody in New
liability.
York to behave erratically.
But in my case, it's working in my favor because now the original company is not calling that first company they called in the past that they had a relationship for almost 20 years is now calling me.
Yeah,
And I'm
you know,
glad, but
it's a
I'm
funny
wondering, has
thing
anybody
because-
else come across this? Because now
We'll
I'm having
send- we'll
people
send
ask
work-
me, what kind of car? What, more
Right.
so than ever.
Well,
No,
you know,
I get that.
yeah, go ahead. Art. Go ahead.
No, go on.
Well, you know, our affiliates will, like, if we can't do it in our own car, I will tell the affiliate, listen, if you need it covered, we have, 3 or 4 people that are vetted out. They own their own car. They're on our software. You will still be able to track them, do all your stuff. And 99% of them will say, go ahead. But they know we're managing the car at that point for that trip. So they're because they know we have a shortage of vehicles. So they're not, and we vet their insurance and their license and everything. But I think in some markets, they don't do that. They just.
There was an authorized transfer of responsibility for that client.
Mhm.
That's what you don't find in so many areas that's the right thing to do is to advise the client, whether it's an individual, a corporation, or another affiliate, that I can't service this, I can't cover this myself. Would you like to take it back, or would you like me to explore options locally?
Give them the option.
You that
Okay.
control.
But
Yeah,
there's,
Here's the other option that goes into this thing is somebody farms a trip into me. And I farm the trip out to a local affiliate. That local affiliate's got 1.5 million in public liability insurance. I've got 5 million. In reality now, my customer has $6.5 million of public liability insurance on that ride. Whereas if they just called me, they'd have 5. If they called my affiliate, they'd have 1.5.
well, so here's the related question to that. So it's not only the transparency of knowing what's going on, but it depends how your insurance is structured, and a lot of companies aren't set up properly.
Yep.
So the reality is, you're probably covered for any auto and
Right.
rented but not owned. A lot of companies don't have rented but not owned. So what happens in that case is, let's say I book a trip and we'll pretend you don't have that coverage, and I send it to you and you send it to an IO, right? I don't have any contractual relationship with that IO.
Right.
I don't know that they're a legal operator. If they get in an accident, their insurance does not cover me. And your insurance is not primary. So if it's less than $1.5 million, it's going to go on that IO's insurance, and I'm going to have to sue you to get paid. Because your insurance is going to say you didn't do the ride, their insurance is primary, talk to them. I'm going to call their insurance, and I don't have a contractual relationship
Well,
with them.
their insurance is always going to be primary.
But not for me as a third party. So the problem is I'm not covered by that third party's insurance at all. I have no contractual relationship with them. So if you don't have rented but not owned,
We do.
I own, right, which most big companies do, but a lot of little companies that are getting into the farm out market aren't doing that. And what happens then is I literally am not covered. So my only way of getting paid is suing you for sending out my work. And it turns into a whole debacle. And the flip side of that is that company operating it legally, right? So one of the things that we push is interstate versus intrastate. Most IOs, one, do not have $1.5 million, let's be honest, right? Like,
Right.
and they don't have interstate operating authority.
Right.
And if they don't have those things and they get in an accident, my job was just sent to an illegal operator, which means my client is going to sue me.
Which means you're liable.
Which means I'm liable.
Totally.
And in most cases, I don't even know what happened because I was lied to and told that company X was doing it, right?
Mhm.
Chicago, New York, it's are both IO markets, which is very unique.
And
compared to most of the country,
just to be clear about this, people that we're doing this with are people that we have long-term relationships with. And they're doing the same thing for us. If we need a car in their market and they're sold out, they're getting the car outside and they're managing the ride for us. And it's kind of we're doing it together.
Yeah,
it's
and
kind of-
same. And I mean, and so it was one of those things where if it's transparent and you have proper coverage, there's literally nothing wrong with it, right? Because
Right.
it's going to go on your rented but not owned. Your insurance is going to cover me whether that guy gets in an accident or not, right? So that's cool. But you really have to be aware and make sure that you're checking for that coverage when you're getting your COIs from these guys.
Right.
Because otherwise your tail is hanging in the wind if they do it. And we all know they do it. We have all double farmed a trip, whether we've been transparent about it or not. We've absolutely probably double farmed a trip. I doubt there's anyone on this call that hasn't had a car breakdown or been booked out and helped somebody out.
Yeah.
It's just
Listen,
amazing.
my outlook is this: in my market, there's very few companies that even own cars. So every single company is farming to a farm.
And New York's the same way.
Right.
I mean, New York and Chicago, almost everyone is an IO that's doing airport transfers, right? Like not everyone, but almost everyone that's actually performing the work is an IO.
Then I must be an angel because I always disclose whether it's my car or somebody else's. Always, never.
Which is, but it's still a double farm.
But
Even if you
it
tell them.
depends. And it
It's
depends on.
I agree with telling them, but you're still going to cover it for them unless
And
they
it
tell you.
depends
that.
on your
Well, or I
volume.
might turn them on sometimes directly to that person. It just depends on the circumstance. Sometimes it makes more sense for us not even to do it. But
Yeah, we just.
but
go
I
with it.
see where you guys are going because once our hands are on it, it's on it.
Yeah, but like what Art says, so like if I call Art for a ride, do I care who fills it? I know he has the rented not owned coverage. I don't want to deal with it.
Right.
I don't care who the end driver. You vetted the end driver. That's why I called you, right? So it's
And
it's
I
just-
would trust in the same circumstance, I would trust that you're going to take my work and you're going to send it to somebody responsible. You're not going to call and fill the ride with an Uber.
right.
You're not going to book an Uber Black. You're going to find that you're going to work with somebody that is responsible, that's going to do just as well as you would do.
And hopefully it's not a fifth transfer to the point where I don't know where it is. That's getting a little wild, you know. But
Yeah,
one
I
or
agree.
two,
I'm calling New York City right now the Wild Wild West.
that's
It
insane.
is.
Because I
Way
have
to
now
go.
had approved 3 trips and they've all been farmed out. One was 4 and the other 2 were 5 times. We were the 5th one it was farmed out to. It's
Wow.
getting crazy. I can't even trust people that I dealt with for 10 years or more.
You know, and it's funny because I expressed that here just last week, about I farmed a trip to a local affiliate and they had farmed it out to someone else without notifying me. And it's funny because it was only the New York operators that said, hey, just be thankful it got covered. So,
That's,
I mean,
And the problem here in Chicago, and in some other markets I found out is not only they farm it out, they put it in a WhatsApp group. So they really don't, most of them sometimes don't even know who the driver is,
that's
depending
right.
in that WhatsApp group. It happened to me and I called the village and said, before you ever farm any of my rides out again, call me first. And the next time I sent him a reservation, he goes, I make sure, he goes, you have my commitment that my drivers will be doing it. I'm like, okay.
But, well, the
Yeah.
issue with those.
I was in the
groups
WhatsApp
and-
group and I saw my own ride posted.
Right, and the problem with that WhatsApp group and the reason that a lot of us can't take advantage of the resources there is because I don't think any of them have the required insurance limits.
That's right.
That is
That's a
right.
They
big
don't have
problem.
the workman's comp, they don't have the 1.5 million. I tried to get into it years ago and it just wasn't
Well,
worth it because of the
That's kind of
requirement.
what enabled the Wild West.
Yeah.
Is that they can just switch stuff and transfer trips
Mhm.
between each other and,
And nobody's bothering them.
right.
Well,
And
the
you know
trucking
what?
guys do
I
that all
get-
the time.
I probably am one of the craziest people here because, and Tracy knows this because, well, she knows I'm crazy, but also the fact that I carry the workers' comp for our independent operators because we had an attorney a few years ago look at it and he was like, I don't trust anybody if they're probably not going to carry it. So carry it yourself. So we have taken on the expense. And to be honest, it's peace of mind for me because they're driving our cars and everything else. And they can't really, it's not really affordable. And this way we don't have any, it's kind of peace of mind, and we're actually finding a policy that we actually are going to be able to go to that's going to be about 50% cheaper than what I have right now. So at the end of the day, I feel good about that in one respect. It's not optimal, but at least they have,
We're doing the same thing. Most independent operators in Chicago don't need workers' comp.
no,
And Tracy and I made a call, and I don't know who we talked to with the state of Illinois, but this guy's like in charge of workers' comp. And he's like, yeah, you know what? If it's their own car and they're driving, they don't need workers' comp. Because as the Illinois Limousine Bus Association, we were researching what these people need to operate legally. And we were totally under the impression that everyone needed workers' comp. The fact of the matter is they don't.
but the catch 22 is when you do an audit.
If it's one person, one car, they do not have to have workers' comp. Now, in our case, if they don't have workers' comp and something happens, we're responsible.
Absolutely.
And in many cases, we're doing what Paula did, though. We have people that don't have workers' comp that we're kind of forced to use simply because we know they've got a clean vehicle. We know that they're good drivers. We know that we're not going to have issues. And we eat the workers' comp to get it done and not have issues. And it's probably not the right thing to do, but it's what we do.
Well, it comes down to quality of service and the customer experience, and the perception by the customer, is what we used to live by. And it seems to get lost in the shuffle a lot these days, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, and most IOs don't have workers' comp. You would
No.
be hard pressed to find one that has it. They just don't have it.
You still see a few companies that are trying to force. That's how I ended up with additional drivers, to be swear to God, because there's still one operator out there who insists that they have a corporation and all that stuff, sign a lease agreement and pay their own workers' comp. Well, when you're giving that dude 2 trips a freaking day, 2 trips a day, I know this for a fact because I just hired the guy back and Tracy knows who it is. It's like, okay, now what? So I was able to bring back one and possibly a second one just because I said, I'll pay it, but you have to work with us. And when you work with us, I expect you to take the trips we give you and not give me a lot of shit about it and all this other stuff. And you know what? It's been working out fantastic. So so I'm like, go ahead. You all, the ones that think that having a corporation is going to protect them from any issue if that driver does the job for them is crazy. It doesn't, it has nothing to do with it. And
if you get a workers' comp audit and they catch it in the audit, first off, they got to catch it. But if they do catch it in the audit, it actually comes down to like 30% of whatever you paid them, less 20% gratuity. That's the amount you pay workers' comp on. So $100 ride would be
on the base.
Yeah, base $100, no, $100 all in. $120 ride would end up being, you pull a 20 off and then it's 30% of the 100. Or actually 30% of the total thing, less than 20%. So it isn't a big number.
Yeah. We just remove all the gratuities and expenses. But I mean, it's amazing how confusing it is here. And when we go and tell people that they can't work here unless they either have a workers' comp or not, they yell at me. They absolutely start screaming at me. And I'm like, well, then, I have to pay yours. Well, why would you have to do that? Well, because you have no proof that you have it. And when we get audited, I mean, I'm smaller than anybody on this group right now. Well, Jim's small too, but I got audited 3 times for workers' comp last year.
Poor Jim.
Oh, Jim's bigger than me though.
Small, Jim.
Jim's 6'7", so he's always going to be bigger than me. But we got audited 3 times last year for workers' comp. It's insane. Like, why? I'm like, I had the smallest payroll. If Michael was on here, I think we called my payroll abysmal for COVID. It was abysmal. He's like, I never even seen a payroll that low. And I'm like, I'm not making it up. But we were at we weren't even at 1 month's average payroll when we filed our workers' comp last year. So the whole thing is crazy, and it's right. They do say that technically they don't need it. But when we file out as the owner, when we file our workers' comp, we're supposed to say everybody we gave work to. So it's crazy, you know?
Paula,
Well, and there's a fine line too, because what if they're leasing their car from somebody who has 5 or 6 cars, right? Now, if they have one car and they own the car and they're their own company, right? Maybe they don't have to have it, but what if they're leasing their car from somebody else and they don't have it and that company doesn't have it?
Yeah,
You know,
some of the lease
Some
guys in
lawyer's
Chicago
going
do,
to
but
find
many
some
don't.
fine line and
Yeah.
saying you should have had it because you leased your car from him and he's got 5 cars.
Yeah, I
Paula,
can't even.
when you work with your affiliates or your IOs, do you require copies of their documentation, their insurance, their licensing, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, we have a date. We don't have a database, but we do have a spreadsheet soon to grow into a database because we have to track the expiration dates. We track the chauffeur license expiration dates because it's illegal for them to operate if their chauffeur license in Chicago has expired. Trust me when I tell you, I found a few already and had to go, hi, you need to renew your license. And they're like, what the hell is she doing? Yeah, because we
don't check their chauffeur's license. We just make sure they got the insurance.
No, we check the chauffeur license.
No.
We do licenses too.
Yeah. And we have
Shameless
copies of
plug.
everybody's chauffeur license.
I mean, it's almost impossible to do that if you're doing any type of volume to check an affiliate chauffeur's license. I mean, if somebody called me and says, I need expiration dates on all of your chauffeur's licenses, I
don't share this with the affiliates. I just do it so I can make sure it's current. That's all I do it for.
Yeah, I mean, but
She's talking about the drivers. She's talking about the drivers that she uses for herself.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah,
I
even
understand.
the IOs.
Personal drivers. Okay.
Mhm.
I understand on affiliates that might be a challenge, but unless there's a corporate requirement for licensing, like having an individual corporate identification card, whether that's current. But as far as, everybody has a PVL, quite as extensive outside of New York. I'm not sure what Boston does, but, just to keep copies of, just because I tell you my license is 3398 in Chicago, it expires in 2022. I should show you a copy of that so you have bona fide evidence that that's a legal license.
So as kind of a shameless plug, one of the things we actually rolled out and we're pushing at the show next month here is we actually built a certification program where companies and IOs can submit their stuff and we keep track of all their paperwork. So anyone in there has their workers' comp in place, has the appropriate insurance, has the licenses for their market. And you can go check if their certification is live. If their stuff expires, then you get a notification saying Chris let his crap expire, yank him out of your pools. And for exactly that reason, because if you're tracking, I think we had north of 2,000 affiliates when I was with Driver Provider. It's even a full-time person tracking COIs is enough to, all they're doing is shuffling paper from the left side of their desk to the right side of the desk and getting paid way too much money to do it compared to letting the computer do it. And so
Taking work away from a stand-up American guy, I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
I look, if people were honest, I wouldn't have a job, right? Let's be clear. I make my living off trying to make people make the right decision, right? And that's why all the compliance rules exist, which is why I have a job. If everyone just tried to run a safe operation, there wouldn't be DOT compliance rules and I wouldn't have a job. But it's the same thing with all this affiliate stuff, right? I mean, we did vetting for one of the major networks and the pass rate was less than 50% of people that applied we qualified to move through. And some were companies that have literally won Operator of the Year awards and weren't legal operators.
Oh God.
So I mean, when I'm saying companies, there's companies that aren't operating illegally today.
Yeah.
And there's a decent chance
Quite a few in New York.
And so it's one of those things where to do proper due diligence, most operators don't have time to look into it to level they should. And so it becomes a balancing point of trusting people and then hoping you're not getting screwed, right? On the flip side. And I'm just not a real trusting person. So
I'm not. But it's hard. People make it hard to trust them, I'm afraid. But you
I
know,
don't think you can afford to.
I don't think we can. I mean,
Tracy,
I
put
met.
on the agenda that we should have a national clearinghouse for documentation from all legitimate operators.
I think Chris, that's what Chris
That's
does.
Chris's
Chris
building.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Hey,
do.
Chris,
There you go.
would you like to come sometime and speak to one of our meetings and explain what you put together and maybe give everybody a demo? I think I asked Joe about that already. Would you
Yeah.
guys be interested? Okay.
I put a link in the thing if anyone wants
Yeah.
to check it out. Forgive the really crappy website. I built it myself. The website designers haven't gotten to it yet. The back end works great. The front website is mediocre at best. So if any of you,
That is one way we can eliminate the independent operators and make them become employees, right? Because 70% of them will probably be eliminated, at least in Chicago. If they're
Well,
in workman's comp and all the other stuff.
well, and if they want to be an independent
prove it.
operator, they have to be a legal independent operator.
Right.
And then you
Right.
can use them, right?
So Chris,
Um,
with your insurance, what do you do for insurance? You're verifying their insurance?
Correct, with the carrier. So I
Okay.
assume everyone is a liar, which is kind of our base stance, and then I hope I'm wrong, right?
Are you verifying the actual coverages or just the fact that they're insured plus, and then the coverage also? For example, the state minimums in Chicago and Illinois are only 350, even though most of us require, $1 million, $1.5 million.
Yeah, so the insurance limits that they have are actually listed on there and you can filter by them.
I understand that.
Whether they're interstate or intrastate, whether they have.
But you have heard that those could be forged and
We
changed.
verify them with the companies, not with them. Anything you
I know.
send, so you send me your thing that says my Chicago permit number is blah, blah, blah. Great. All that does is make my research easier. The fact that you said it doesn't mean anything.
So you are actually verifying the actual coverages that are in place,
Yes.
not just the fact that they're current and.
Correct.
So
Okay,
then,
got it.
so then Chris, just to clear it up, so if we were gonna farm to Windy City and
Yep.
we got their credentials from you instead of them, and we did a trip and they got canceled and we didn't get the notification quick enough, you have a policy in place that covers them?
So you have to be listed as additional insured anyway. So you should get
Correct.
notification at the same time we do.
We have people who were additionally insured and basically got a notice from their insurance company that they're canceled.
Right.
Yeah, if they're
So
insurance company.
suddenly they're canceled and we didn't get the notification.
Yeah, because they used US mail. I never got one too. You're right. That's happened a couple times. I've never
Sometimes
got
you
anything.
don't get this stuff when you should.
Yeah, so we get them the same way you do. So if we get it first, we notify everyone, but is it possible that one doesn't show up? Totally.
So how does that work then? If we're
Um,
counting on getting this information from you and somehow it doesn't get to you and we're still using that subcontractor and find out that they don't have insurance, do you have a policy in place that's like an umbrella policy
No.
that says,
This is
No.
a
No.
used, no.
Chris has a release form you're going to sign when you sign up with them saying that you don't hold them responsible.
So essentially, yeah, basically. So your recourse then is that the insurance company is required to notify you. That's who's responsible for doing that, no one else. So if they get in an accident, your recourse is with Lancer Insurance or, RLI or whoever, because that's their responsibility.
Right.
We do it as an additional service, but our real goal in this was to keep the cost point low enough that most IOs could do it. And it just doesn't provide a margin to take on the liability. The simple reality is this isn't a profitable service for me. I don't make crap on it. And we don't want to, but somebody needed to create at least a basic level of due diligence that most companies don't have the time or resources to do. So if you're paying somebody $60,000, $70,000 a year to shuffle papers, can you really afford to do that in a post-COVID world? Or does it make more sense to pay $300 a month, use the database, and at least get most of that still done? And the same thing could happen if you're doing it in-house. You're on the exact same risk.
Right.
Your risk doesn't change at all. All it changes is the person doing it, right? And that you get that notification. if it comes through. It's not sitting on their desk waiting for them to tell dispatch, 2 months later when they get to it. But yeah,
So
the risk
do you facilitate, you're just showing proof of insurance. You're not facilitating additionally insured.
we send the request off automatically. The system automatically sends it to their agent to add you. So what you do is you say, I want to partner with Chris. You look at my stuff, you click on it. I say, yeah, I want to partner with Art. That seems like a good fit for me. I sign your agreement. It automatically puts that in your thing and sends a request to my insurance agent to add you as additionally insured.
Got
When
it.
they send it back, it adds it to your file. And then it also adds us to help track those expirations, because theoretically we should get notified if somebody drops. And then they do a once-a-year renewal, but we're also verifying the airports, city, state requirements for whatever location they're operating in. So if I say I can operate out of Newark, I better be able to operate out of Newark, or it's not showing on my list of airports. If I say I own a minibus, that minibus isn't listed unless I own it. So you can't add, if you're a CSV guy, you can't add buses, that kind of thing. So we verify the driver list or the vehicle list with the insurance as well. The goal is to provide a basic level of due diligence for everybody. There is no real feasible liability reduction because the insurance companies don't report in real time. So if I got canceled this morning, no one's going to know this afternoon.
So this is the shameless part, Chris?
Hey, yeah, I mean, you asked it.
I know, I'm kidding.
No, our real thing is that, people being compliant is good for me, right? As a compliance.
It's good for us all, absolutely.
And it's good for the industry, right? Because we deal with less garbage. And so I have no problem, throwing someone out that doesn't want to be compliant. Like, I'm sorry, you can't be on the list. Fix your stuff. I'm happy to tell you how. If you want to, cool. If not, bye. So that's
Okay.
kind of the general concept without talking everyone's ear off. But
Does anybody have any really good news to share?
we're seeing a huge
Business
pickup.
is back.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is, but
It beats last year.
yeah, it is. Actually, we're more
Average ticket
profitable
price
now
is
than
up
we
another
were.
17% in June. I mean, I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Kind of weird, when you take all these numbers and you kind of cut everything out and you kind of go down to a bare minimum, and you don't have the vehicles insured that you don't need. You can actually be more profitable in this environment than you can in a fully operational 2019 environment.
It feels good.
A lot of our clients' office staff is half of where it was, and their
Right.
volume is probably 70-80%. And so, obviously I'm a huge proponent of outsourcing, but I think that holds true not just for compliance, but also things like accounting, HR,
Right.
anything that isn't your core business function. You should look really strongly at whether or not it makes sense to pay someone in your office for it, or you can use a service. And I think people are doing that more because, let's be honest, we all did, more roles than we wanted last year because there wasn't anyone else. And so I think we got rid of a lot of fat. A lot of companies had way too many people, way too big offices, way too many vehicles.
Fat, dumb, and happy.
Yeah, when the money's rolling, you can afford to make bad decisions, right?
And I think with a lot of the automation that we've been forced to implement in order to streamline our processes, I mean, I got to be honest with you, I thought beforehand that there were, and I'm not saying anyone here, any specific company, but I thought that there were affiliate managers who, I mean, the number of touch points and phone calls that some of these affiliate managers made seemed nothing more than a justification of their job. I mean, when you have 10 calls to confirm a trip, that's a bit excessive.
I'm sorry, Tim, what was your point with that? That it's too much or not enough? The audio on my end was a little bit poor. I just wanted to make sure I understood your point.
I think you said pre-COVID, it was too much, and due to COVID stuff and people eliminating office staff, that things have changed for the better with that some of these affiliate managers were doing, making 10 phone calls or 10 text messages to verify a ride just to justify their job.
Well,
And now they're
and we
relying
saw
on
that-
technology to do it.
Now they're
how
relying
much
on
that
technology.
Gina,
how much that is COVID, how much of that is tech changes? I mean, looking at programs like Grid and stuff, I mean, that's, and in my opinion, that's where the industry should have been 10 years ago, right?
Agreed.
Shared GPS, shared status updates, all that kind of stuff should just be the basics of an affiliate partnership at this point.
True enough.
Agreed.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, is that we've used technology like Gina in order to streamline our processes to where we don't need to have that person. And I mean, like I said, I am convinced that in the past that there have been some affiliate managers that, would reach out over and over and over again to confirm a trip. I mean, when you get 3 calls within the same 15 minutes confirming the same trip, that I don't understand it. I mean, it just, again, it's
A lot of those affiliate managers probably don't have jobs today.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was built into the dispatch and reservations function in many cases, and there was certain, I'm trying to remember the company, it was a broker out of New York City that did it incessantly. I think it was written in their contract with their clients. Most of the brokers, the national brokers like Savoy and others, I think it was just part of their modus operandi. That's how they justify their existence, and they didn't have a place or whatever. But they,
I kind of disagree. I think that, depending on your volume, it's advantageous to have somebody who can go out there and see who's in the market and know what's going on in the market and negotiate rates for you within that market and really pull everything together to create that streamline so that reservations can just send the trips. But dispatch can, and the automation is set up and everything is set up and ready to go. All this grid stuff and all of this other stuff is wonderful and it should have been there a long time ago. But you still need somebody setting it up. You still need somebody maintaining it. You still need somebody, saying what your policies are and making sure that they're followed through. And a good affiliate manager is going to do just that. They're going to make sure you have 3 people in the market. They're going to make sure that, well, that's true. They're going to make sure you got 3 people in the market. They're going to make sure you're getting the best rates. They're going to make sure that they're just going to make sure that everything's happening. And, and depending on the volume that you have, if you've got somebody that you're paying X amount a year, and you're generating millions of dollars in revenue in other cities, at that point, you can't afford to have somebody that's just watching that. Depends on your volume.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. But what I was alluding to, and maybe not very well, was that when you got some functional person calling your drivers directly, are you on location? They're calling your office every 15 minutes to see which car is, what's the driver, what's the plate number, is he on location? That's the kind of thing I think it can be an obstruction or not only an annoyance, but intrusive in your operations.
What? I have to say, Art and I've been connected by Gina for almost 2 years now. As I tell everybody, we don't do a ton of trips, it's whatever comes through, but not once do his dispatchers call unless there's a change in the trip or something else. We don't hear from them. They see the driver's status. Our drivers are totally trained to use their app. And then we watch them too. They get the statuses. They see the driver's photo. And I've talked to Jim about this. There's a lot of operators who just refuse to use technology. And so now, here, you cannot work here if you won't use the app. But there are other operators in our market who say that Johnny's too old. He doesn't like technology. Really? Well, who runs the company, you or Johnny? It's like, I think we have to also look at the way we operate and look at the virtue of it.
You have this technology and you need to use the technology because instead of calling that driver, you can pull up a screen and see that the driver is on location.
Correct.
So there's a lot of stuff that makes the job easier. And I think an affiliate manager really doesn't do that stuff anymore. The affiliate manager would basically set all of this stuff up, but dispatch should be monitoring all the trips.
Mhm.
Well,
I think the
but
roles
dispatch
change.
shouldn't be
So there's
making
no
those
difference
calls.
between a customer traveling in Chicago or traveling in New York or Los Angeles or Boise, Idaho, wherever they're at. We could still lose them based on that farm.
Without a doubt.
Doesn't matter. We could lose them based on our driver, on the farm's driver. I mean, we could still lose them. I think that the roles changed, and the roles changed in a couple ways. The affiliate manager is now talking to that customer that's booking all these trips that are going into New York and saying, hey, you know, Joanne, how's it going? Is everything going good? You know, what can we do? Just kind of, the roles changed. It's kind of shifted to another, it's actually taken the affiliate manager's job, changed their job, but changed it for the better, because now they're able to concentrate on that quality and make sure you're getting the rates, you're getting the service, you're with the right affiliates, your customers are happy with those affiliates. So the roles changed. It's kind of, I don't know.
I'm going to have to put a damper on this parade because we are at 5 minutes after 12 and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Are there any closing comments? This is a good discussion, by the way. Any closing thoughts? Should we do this again? Was it helpful?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
I think we're too respectful.
Well, I'm sorry, too bad. Okay. And that'll be on the recording, by the way, so I should behave myself. All right.
Shit, you recorded this?
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right, everyone, I've got to run.
Yeah,
Great
so
seeing
do
you
I.
all and
Bye,
love
guys.
the discussion.
Yeah,
Thank
and listen, thank
Just
you.
remember, Art, the recording will outlive you.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm worried about.
Thank you,
Now I'm
everybody.
wondering.
You
Later,
have a good
guys.
day. Bye, Tom.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.